Hello. My name is Odessa Quinlan. And 5 weeks before what was supposed to be my wedding, my sister tried on my dress, named my unborn child, and turned me into a punchline on the internet. They said I was overreacting. They said I was dramatic. They said I should be grateful. But what I remember most is standing in a fitting room, in a dress I paid for, in a life I no longer recognized. The fitting room was quiet, except for the muted hum of an air vent above and the soft scuff of satin against my skin. The fitting room was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that only exists in sterile places where people try on versions of themselves. It was interrupted only by the muted hum of an air vent overhead and the slow, barely there rasp of satin as it shifted against my skin. The fabric clung in all the wrong ways, not tight or uncomfortable, just wrong. It wasn't the dress's fault. It was doing exactly what it was made to do. Be white. Be simple. Be noticed, gently. That's why I chose it. Because it didn't shout. It didn't sparkle. It didn't pretend. It just was, like me, a placeholder in someone else's scene. A quiet thing in a room that never truly belonged to me. I stood still under the warm spotlight, the one meant to flatter any skin tone, any shape, any insecurity. It did none of that. I watched the way the fabric curved at my waist, how it brushed down like water over stone, how the dress whispered instead of screamed. I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like an imposter in a story I no longer believed in. I traced the edge of the neckline with my fingers, slowly, like it might change its mind and become something else. Something real. The fabric was smooth, not too delicate, strong in a way that reminded me of women who kept secrets in their bones and smiles in their silence. My chest rose and fell, each breath uncertain. Measured. I took one step forward. The train dragged behind like a ghost I hadn't made peace with. Maybe I never would. Then the door creaked open. Wait, you're actually going with white? Valora's voice cut through the space like a wine glass shattering on a marble floor. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could already see her in the mirror behind me, smirking, styled within an inch of perfection, holding her phone in one hand like a weapon dressed in pink glitter. Her nails clicked against the case as if tapping out a countdown. Her tone wasn't confused. It was amused, confident, loud in that way only certain women know how to be without ever raising their voices. I kept staring at myself in the mirror, even as I felt the air shift. I mean, she continued, stepping into the room like it was hers. It's your call, obviously. It's just tradition's kind of for, virgins. But hey, to each their own. Her laugh wasn't mean. It wasn't sharp. It was worse than that. It was casual. Calder exhaled from outside the curtain, a breath that sounded dangerously like a chuckle, like he didn't know whose side he was on. Maybe he never had. Somewhere in the background, my mother sighed. That signature sigh, thin, tired, full of invisible warnings. The kind that says, don't make this into something. Let it pass. Be polite. No one corrected her. No one said anything in my defense. The weight of that silence fell harder than the insult. I clenched the hem of the dress in my hand, tight enough to wrinkle it, tight enough to feel like I was holding on to something that was slipping through anyway. I didn't say a word. They didn't mean it to be cruel. That's what they'd all say later, if I ever dared bring it up. They were just joking, just teasing, just being honest. And I was always just being sensitive. But I felt it. Bone deep, like a bruise you forgot about until someone poked it. And in that moment, I realized the dress wasn't the only thing they thought didn't fit me. 2 hours later, I sat in my car with the windows cracked halfway down, breathing in the mix of leather seats and lavender fabric spray still clinging to my skin. The air outside was cool, neutral. I welcomed it. I was still wearing the dress, still pretending. Or maybe refusing to give up on a version of the day I thought I'd have. I opened my phone and scrolled through our wedding group chat. Slowly, mechanically, just trying to remember when my name stopped showing up. The messages blurred together, plans, jokes, half decisions made without me. At the top, Valora's pin message. Can't wait to be maid of honor. Already have dress ideas. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. Of course you are, from Calder's cousin. A yas from my sister, which stung in a way I didn't know how to describe. I searched for my response. There wasn't one, because I hadn't given one, because I'd never been asked. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. A colonizer planting her flag. And everyone saluted. I kept scrolling back, past Pinterest links, mood boards, venue mock-ups, cake flavors, past the screenshots of floral arrangements and sarcastic memes about over-controlling brides. The irony was almost poetic, and somewhere between the emoji storms and passive-aggressive jokes, Valora had taken over everything. It wasn't even subtle, but it didn't have to be. She knew no one would stop her. And she was right. My name wasn't there. Not as a decision-maker. Not even as a tag. This was supposed to be my wedding. Instead, it had become her production. A notification pinged, a new message. Another meme from Valora. Bridezilla be like, my wedding, my rules. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just closed the chat and opened the Notes app. And I started a list. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting shadows across the concrete lines of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw myself, not as a bride, not even as a woman preparing for something sacred, just a passenger, in someone else's timeline. I looked tired, older than 34, older than I was allowed to be when dreaming still mattered. I pulled up a photo on my phone. Last Thanksgiving. One of those family portraits people post and pretend they're real. Everyone gathered around the table, smiling. Perfect. Like a magazine spread selling warmth and tradition. Valora in the middle, naturally, raising her glass like the matriarch she wasn't. Calder beside her, arm lazily draped across her shoulder. My mother beside them mid-laugh. And me. I was there too. Barely. Cropped at the edge. An afterthought. I stared at it for a long time. Not the kind of stare where you try to remember, but the kind where you suddenly realize what you've been refusing to admit. I whispered into the stillness of the car. I'm always outside the frame. I drove straight to my parents' house that Sunday, the morning sun stretching low across the hills, casting a faint golden haze over the dogwoods. They lined the road like witnesses, pale white blossoms trembling in the breeze, delicate, almost translucent. A quiet kind of beauty, the kind you miss if you're not looking closely. They reminded me of that picture, the one where I was barely visible, framed more like background noise than someone central to the story. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive, the kitchen window was open and the smell of bacon, maple syrup, and fresh ground coffee floated out like clockwork. My mother's version of tradition. Her rituals were always perfectly timed. Brunch on Sundays, with her white linen napkins and matching china she only ever used when Valora was home. On the counter sat a gold envelope, my name written in her looping script. I should have known. Inside was the mock-up wedding invitation. The cardstock was weighty in my hands, textured like luxury, like something that deserved to be kept in a box long after the day was over. The names were there, mine and Calder's, but the photograph printed across the top stopped me cold. It was from our engagement shoot, the one we did in that open field, the sunlight dripping across the sky like honey. I'd love those photos, but this one, the one they'd chosen, wasn't the one I remembered. Valora was laughing, her face turned slightly toward Calder, her hand brushing his sleeve as if she belonged there. I stood beside him, technically, but my face was caught in a slant of shadow. I looked like a guest in my own story, like someone photobombing their moment. My stomach turned slightly, a slow and subtle twist. The photographer had told me, "This one shows your bond best." I'd assumed he meant the bond between Calder and me. Now, looking again, I wasn't so sure. Mom came up behind me, drying her hands on a dish towel the color of egg yolks. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked, her voice all warmth and pride. I turned the card. "You chose this one." She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Valora helped me pick. She's got such a good eye, doesn't she?" Her voice was casual, unapologetic, that same breezy tone she used when offering seconds at dinner or rearranging a centerpiece I'd already finished. But this wasn't napkin placement. This was my face, my wedding, my moment. And somehow, it had already been handed off. I pressed my thumb into the corner of the photo until it bent just slightly. "I was wondering when the wedding stopped being about us," I said softly, more to myself than to her. Then I realized, maybe it never was. She didn't respond, just moved around me, humming as she set out the butter dish. The dining room was its usual chaos, too many voices, too little space, chairs scraping, utensils clinking, everyone talking over one another like the goal was to win, not connect. Calder sat across from me, a soft smile plastered on his face like he'd borrowed it from someone else. Mom was at the head, naturally. Valora, center stage as always. She was in the middle of a story about a coworker's engagement, describing the ring with theatrical flair. "Honestly," she said, drawing the syllables out like taffy, "some people just don't know what suits them. You can't fake taste." Mom chuckled. Calder gave a polite laugh. My spoon stirred my coffee in slow circles, the sound of porcelain on ceramic grating like static in my ears. Then Mom, as if she just remembered something vital, reached for a small spiral notebook beside her. "Oh, before I forget, Valora has an idea for the ceremony flow. What if she MCs the reception? She's got that sparkle." I blinked. "It's my ceremony." Mom waved the objection off like a fruit fly. "It's just a suggestion, honey. No need to get worked up." But I wasn't worked up. I was disappearing. Valora leaned back, smug in her chair. "Don't worry, sis," she said. "I'll make sure people remember it." Everyone laughed, even Calder. And I did what I always do, I smiled. Because that's what you do when you're the peacekeeper in a room that doesn't even realize a war has begun. After brunch, I stayed behind to help clean. Valora floated out, offering a vague excuse about needing to call someone. Mom handed me a dish rag like it was an heirloom. The kitchen still smelled like syrup and lemon soap. On the counter sat her planning binder. I reached to neaten the scattered pages, but something caught my eye, Valora's looping handwriting at the top of the guest list page. Add Ryan plus Jessica, my friends from work. My hands moved on their own, flipping through pages I wasn't meant to read. The seating chart stopped me cold. Table 1, Calder. Valora. Mom. Dad. Me. Pushed toward the edge of the diagram. A note in the margin read, "Valora speaks after Dad's toast." I closed the binder like it was fragile, something that might snap if handled the wrong way. A memory surfaced, uninvited. 6th grade. I'd gotten the lead in the school play. Valora, sobbing in the hallway, had begged me to give it up. "Please, just this once, let me have it," she'd said. And I did. I handed her the script, the spotlight, the applause. I remembered clapping the hardest. Some patterns are invisible until you trace them backwards. I left early, claiming a headache. No one tried to stop me, not even Calder. The drive home was silent, the kind of quiet that presses in on you from all sides. Gravel crackled beneath the tires. I passed a couple walking their golden retriever, hand in hand, smiling like they'd never had to explain their worth to anyone. At home, I sat on the couch, the mock-up invitation still in my bag. I pulled it out and stared again at that photo. The gold trim caught the light. Everyone looked beautiful in it. Except I wasn't in it, not really. I snapped a photo and texted Calder. "Did you see the picture they picked?" A minute later, he replied, "Everyone looks great in it." I stared at the message, the screen blurring slightly as tears I hadn't authorized welled up. He wasn't wrong. Everyone did look great. But I wasn't everyone. I was the bride. Or at least, I was supposed to be. And somehow, even in that role, I'd been edited out. The text from Calder still glowed on my phone long after the screen should have dimmed. "Everyone looks great in it." I read it again while the car idled in the driveway outside the venue. My hands rested on the steering wheel, the same way you brace for an impact you already know is coming. The venue sat quietly on the edge of the hills, weathered wood, vines creeping along stone pillars, the kind of place that smelled like rain in memory. My father had proposed to my mother here. He told me once, years before cancer took him, that this place reminded him of second chances. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. I walked the path lined with cracked bricks, my shoes scraping against gravel. Calder trailed a few steps behind, his phone in hand, answering messages I'd stopped asking about. Mom strolled ahead, humming approval at the ivy-covered archway, while Valora twirled around, phone camera ready. "This is it," I said softly. "Dad used to say the spot had magic. It's where it all started." Valora's voice cut through, sharp and bright. "It's cute," she said, snapping a photo. "Kind of vintage. A little cheap though, no?" I turned slowly. Calder looked up from his phone, just long enough to meet my eyes, then looked back down. Mom chuckled, distracted. "Oh, it's charming, honey. Valora just means it's not flashy." I swallowed the taste of metal in my mouth. "I don't want flashy. I want familiar." Valora shrugged, already moving on. Sure. It's your day. Just maybe people expect something a little more polished from you guys. Calder's company, all that. Perception matters." No one disagreed. The wind picked up, lifting the edges of my hair and the hem of my dress. The silence that followed felt louder than any insult. They didn't know what this place meant. Or worse, they didn't care. When we left, Valora was already posting a video. "Venue scouting for my sister's wedding. What do we think?" The camera panned past my face, settling on Calder beside her. I watched him smile. My father's memory had a price tag, and apparently it was below budget. The catering meeting was next. Same afternoon, different kind of ache. The manager, a polite man with silver hair, greeted me like he was expecting someone else. "Mrs. Royce," he said cheerfully. "Glad we could finalize the upgrades." "Upgrades?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. The plated menu, extra entree options, bar service. Your sister had great ideas." "My sister?" He blinked, confused. "Valora. She said you two talked. She gave me the go-ahead last week." My pulse slowed, every word stretching thin. "She doesn't have that authority." He flipped through the clipboard, tapping signatures. Calder signed this version, said she was helping coordinate. I glanced at the page. My fiancé's signature sat there neatly, right beneath Valora's notes in looping handwriting. "She's very organized," he added kindly. I nodded, feeling my stomach twist. "She always has been." He smiled, oblivious. "Well, everything's set. I'll email you the updated invoice." I signed where he pointed, my pen heavy in my hand. He thanked me for being such an easy bride. Easy. That's what they called it when you stopped fighting. Apparently, the bride just signs the checks. And claps. That evening, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, contract folders spread across the wood. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, drafting an email to the caterer. "Please disregard any menu changes not confirmed by me directly." I stared at the line, read it again, then deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I wasn't ready. I opened another document instead. Copied the contracts. Saved them in a folder labeled Wedding Originals. A small act, barely defiant, but it felt like breathing after holding my lungs too long. I remembered high school, the night I raised my voice at Valora for reading my private messages out loud to her friends. She cried. I was grounded. That lesson stuck. Being quiet keeps peace. Peace keeps families together. I closed the laptop and pressed my palm flat against the wood. Not anymore, I whispered. I wasn't ready to fight. Not yet, but I was done playing dumb. By midnight, the printer hummed through the quiet, spitting out page after page. Contracts, invoices, receipts. Every piece of paper that carried my name but someone else's decisions. I slid them into a binder, one sheet at a time. Each page felt heavier than the last. Evidence, not of crime, but of erasure. Valora's laughter from earlier still rang faintly in my ears. The way Calder had smiled beside her. I wondered if he realized what he'd signed away. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't care. I slipped the final page inside a clear sleeve, labeled it with black ink. Venue, approved by Odessa Quinlan only. Then I closed the binder. Not anger. Not yet. But movement. And for the first time in this entire wedding, I made a decision no one else knew about. The binder sat on the kitchen counter, its spine thick with every choice I'd made that no one else respected. Beside it, pastel balloons swayed gently from the ceiling fan, still deflating from the baby shower earlier that day. The smell of vanilla cupcakes and perfume clung to the air like a memory I didn't want to keep. I hadn't wanted a shower. Calder said it would bring everyone together. He was right about that, everyone but me. The backyard was a parade of soft pinks and blues. My mother had insisted on neutral colors to avoid revealing the baby's gender. She said it was classy, traditional. But Valora had never cared for rules that didn't serve her. She glided from table to table, dressed in coral silk that caught every bit of sunlight. Every guest she touched turned toward her like she was the one being celebrated. She raised her glass during a toast, voice loud enough to carry over the laughter. To Odessa, she said sweetly. And to Emily. She's going to be the luckiest little girl in the world. The laughter didn't stop, but something in me did. It took a moment for her words to register. Emily. She said it so easily, as if she'd been waiting to. Someone popped a confetti cannon. Pink paper rained down around us. My mother gasped, half shock, half approval. Calder blinked, frozen mid-smile. I pressed my hand against my belly, instinctively protective. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, steady and sharp. We had agreed not to learn the gender. It was supposed to be our secret, something sacred between us. Valora smiled as though nothing happened. Oops. Guess the secret's out. My bad. She didn't look sorry. The crowd turned their attention back to the cake. No one noticed the way my hands trembled. I stood there in a storm of pink paper and polite laughter, wondering if there was anything left in this family that hadn't already been claimed by her. She named my child before I even met her. Hours later, the house was quiet again. I sat on the couch surrounded by ribbons and half-open gifts, trying to breathe past the weight pressing down on my ribs. My phone buzzed. A message from the family group chat lit up the screen. Valora, can't believe how gorgeous that dress was today. Just for fun. Attached was a photo. She was wearing my wedding gown. Standing in front of the boutique mirror, the same one I'd faced weeks ago, her hand resting on her hip. The caption read, just for fun. But wow. The comment section beneath it grew by the second. Mom, you look stunning, sweetheart. Calder, haha, behave. Leave some attention for the real bride. Valora, oops. Couldn't resist. Not one of them said it was wrong. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The silence in the house felt alive, whispering things I didn't want to believe. Dad would have stopped this. He would have seen me. You don't have to be loud to be worth listening to, he used to say. He told me that when I was 8, after I lost a spelling bee because I whispered the answer instead of saying it out loud. He's been gone 10 years, and I still haven't learned how to raise my voice. I copied the image, saved it to my phone. Proof, not memory. Later that night, I found myself in the spare room, the one that used to be mine when I was a kid. The walls were still the same pale yellow, faded at the corners. A box of my old things sat beneath the window. I pulled out a notebook, the kind covered in stickers and doodles. My handwriting from 16 looked soft, hopeful. I want to be a good mom, one page read. A kind wife. I smiled bitterly. I had done that. I'd been kind. I'd been patient. I kept the peace. None of it had stopped them from walking right through me. I flipped through more pages, school notes, half-written poems, a pressed flower I didn't remember keeping. My throat tightened as I closed the cover. On the nightstand, my phone buzzed again. New photo in the group chat. Valora modeling bridesmaid dresses. Mom commenting hearts. Calder replying, "We'll let Odessa pick from these, right?" I put the phone face down. Then I picked it back up, opened the chat, and hit leave group. No message. No goodbye. Just gone. They wanted my silence. They can have it, but it won't mean what they think it means. Sometime past midnight, I wandered into the nursery we'd started. A single lamp glowed softly in the corner, casting long shadows over the unfinished crib. On the rocking chair lay the tiny dress Valora had given me at the shower, pink lace, delicate and perfect. I picked it up, feeling the softness between my fingers. It was beautiful. It was hers, not mine. I folded it carefully, slowly, deliberately. I found an old gift box from the wedding registry and placed the dress inside. Then I wrote on the lid, in black ink, 2 words, "Not yours." I set the box on the highest shelf in the closet, above the baby blankets and unopened gifts. A place out of reach. And maybe, for the first time, I'd start acting like the mother I wanted my daughter to remember. I closed the closet door softly, the box with the pink lace dress now tucked away behind a folded blanket and a spare crib sheet. My hands lingered on the doorknob longer than needed, as if sealing something more than fabric inside. By the time I pulled into Calder's parents' driveway, the smile I'd practiced in the mirror had worn thin. It was planning day again. The one where decisions were supposedly finalized, where I was meant to feel celebrated, but mostly felt consulted like a guest speaker brought in too late. Inside, the dining table was already cluttered with notebooks, printed timelines, empty coffee mugs. Valora was in her usual spot, center, arms moving as she spoke, laughing like she was headlining a show. "I just think the welcome speech should set the tone," she said, flipping through a script she'd clearly typed herself. "Make people feel like they're part of something elegant. Polished. Not too stiff, though. Warm. Like family." I opened my mouth, but she was already on to the next topic. Table numbers, signature cocktails, the playlist. At one point, I cleared my throat. "Actually, I was thinking maybe we could." Calder didn't look up. He just said, "Let her have it. She needs the spotlight more than you do." The words landed with the softest touch and the sharpest edge. I blinked. "More than I do." His head lifted slightly, finally meeting my gaze. "You've never liked being the center of attention. She thrives in it. It's just easier." I sat very still, letting the air settle around me like dust after a dropped plate. A memory bloomed. 5th grade. I'd been cast as the lead in the spring play. Valora cried backstage the night before opening. "Just this once," she begged. "Please." I gave her the part. My teacher told me afterward that I was gracious. That word had tasted like metal on my tongue. I looked around the room. Calder's mother nodded as Valora spoke. My own mother was scribbling notes, humming approval. I realized I'd given her the stage my whole life. This time I was walking off it. 2 days later, a box showed up on the porch. The delivery label was printed neatly, the return address from an old friend who couldn't attend the wedding. I opened it slowly, surrounded by silence. Inside was a delicate cake knife set engraved with our names, or rather, the names they thought were ours. To Valora and Calder. My chest tightened. I checked the packing slip. The gift had been sent by Michelle, a friend from college. She would never make that mistake. I called her. She picked up on the third ring. Odessa. Got the invite. So sad I can't make it. Hope you got the gift. I did. The engraving was odd. A pause. I just copied the names from your registry. Calder added it last week, I think. Of course he had. Thanks, I said, for everything. I hung up and stared at the silver glinting in the box. Valora and Calder. Together. Etched in steel like it had always been that way. I grabbed a Sharpie and scratched the label. The marker squeaked as I pressed too hard, ink bleeding through the paper. I didn't write my name. I didn't write anything at all. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's a blade. He gave her my place, and they all watched it happen like it was normal. That Friday, we met again at Calder's family home for another planning dinner. The room was full. His aunts, my mother, Valora Calder. They were passing around color swatches and appetizer samples like everything was already decided. The seating chart came up. Valora pulled out a spreadsheet. So we're thinking immediate family up front, obviously. Then bridal party and maybe... I stood. No one noticed at first. Then the room hushed, slow as a dimming light. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This is my wedding. Valora blinked. Of course. And we're just trying to... I held up a hand. I've stayed quiet long enough. If I'm not leading it, I'm not attending it. Calder opened his mouth. Then shut it. My mother frowned. Honey, this isn't the time. Yes, it is. My voice shook, but no one laughed. And maybe that's when I knew I wasn't invisible anymore. I left before dessert. No one followed. In the car, I didn't cry. I opened my binder instead, the one tucked behind the passenger seat. I added a new tab, labeled it with a ballpoint pen that had run dry halfway through. Exit plan. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew it was mine. It was time to find out who I could be if I stopped being who they expected. The tab in my binder still said exit plan. I kept flipping to it in quiet moments, like touching a bruise to check if it still hurt. I didn't know what I was exiting yet, but something inside me already had its suitcase packed. A week later came the engagement party. Calder's idea, his parents' house, Valora's playlist. I'd stopped trying to count how many family events had turned into stages for her. I smiled for pictures, held a glass of sparkling water, and watched her move through the crowd as if she owned the air between us. Halfway through the evening, she clinked her glass for attention. Her earrings sparkled under the soft lights strung across the patio. Everyone, she said brightly. I just want to make a toast to the happy couple. She looked right at me, then at Calder, then back at the guests. You know, she laughed. If I hadn't convinced Calder not to leave, none of this would exist. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just thoughtless. Easy. I felt my smile tighten, the way fabric stretches before it rips. Not to leave, I asked softly. No one heard me. Mom smiled, shaking her head like Valora was adorable. Oh, that girl, she said, raising her glass. Always exaggerating. But Valora's grin didn't waver. She sipped her champagne like she told a secret only she understood. I turned to Calder. He avoided my eyes. She was rewriting our story mid-sentence, and they let her. The rest of the evening moved in fragments. Music, laughter, plates clinking, but I couldn't feel any of it. Every congratulations, every hug felt misplaced. Like they weren't congratulating me, but her performance. When the last guest left, I went inside to help with cleanup. The kitchen smelled of frosting and spilled wine. Valora leaned against the counter, tapping her phone. That was unnecessary, I said. She looked up, innocent as always. What? That toast. Oh, come on, it was funny. Everyone laughed. Because they didn't know what it meant. She smiled thinly. Relax. Cease. You're too serious. Calder and I just understand each other. Always have. She brushed past me, perfume trailing behind like smoke. Apparently, I owed my engagement to someone else's monologue. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, binder open, laptop humming beside me. I hadn't meant to look through Calder's emails. His account synced automatically to mine months ago, and I never bothered to disconnect it. I just needed to double-check the final payment confirmation for our venue. The subject line caught my eye. Reservation confirmation, the Ridgeview Estate. I frowned. That wasn't the name of our venue. I clicked. The email opened to a sleek image of a luxury estate. Modern glass walls, infinity pool, rooftop ceremony deck overlooking the mountains. The contract was attached. The contact name read, Primary, Valora Dane. Co-signer, Calder Royce. For a moment, I couldn't move. They'd booked another venue. Without me. The message, thread below, told the rest of the story. Valora confirming color themes, Calder approving menu upgrades. His words, this feels more our style. Our style. I stared at the screen, the blue light painting my hands in cold shades. They weren't planning a wedding. They were planning a show, and I was the forgotten act. I printed the contract. I didn't cry. By midnight, the printer whirred softly, spitting out pages like confessions. I slid them into my binder, labeling a new divider, unauthorized transactions. The sound of the hole puncher echoed through the kitchen. Paper, steel, each click louder than the last. My father's voice came to me suddenly, memory sharp and clear. He'd been sitting on the porch one evening, smoke curling from his coffee mug, watching me draw. The moment you think they'll steal your voice, he said. You prepare to record everything. I was 13 then. I didn't understand. I do now. I opened my email, typed 2 words in the subject line, prenup clause revisit. Then I hit send. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing the truth. The next morning, I logged into the wedding website Valora had built. Her face was the banner photo, her and Calder smiling at some tasting event I hadn't attended. Beneath, the headline read, Welcome to Calder and Odessa's celebration. Except there was no Odessa. Just the pictures Valora had curated, herself helping with floral samples, standing beside Calder in front of the new venue. I clicked Edit Access, then Remove. The system asked for confirmation. Are you sure you want to remove yourself? I clicked yes. My profile vanished. I wasn't on the guest list anymore. And maybe that was the point. I hadn't said no out loud yet, but I'd started acting like I had. The next morning, the quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath. The sun was already high by the time I opened my eyes, slicing through the curtains in thin, accusing lines. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand, vibrating so long it sounded less like a notification and more like a warning. I reached for it lazily, already bracing for some trivial vendor update, or a gentle reminder from the wedding planner I still hadn't committed to. But it wasn't trivial. Hundreds of notifications. The same headline, in different fonts, on every app one had. Bride loses it over wedding drama. Bridezilla goes viral in Family Feud video. When your sister-in-law knows how to edit, I clicked one without thinking. The video started mid-laugh. The screen shook with motion and sunlight, the kind of casual chaos that made it feel real. At first glance, it looked like a harmless party clip, until I realized the voice in the background was mine, but the words weren't. Valora's voice chirped from behind the camera, all full concern and sugary calm. She's just overwhelmed, poor thing. She's under so much pressure. But as she spoke, the screen cut to a rapid montage, my eyes rolling during a vendor call, my hand waving in frustration. A sharp inhale caught mid-sentence, spliced together like I was throwing a tantrum. The final clip was from the engagement party. I remember that moment clearly. I was adjusting my dress strap and whispering to Calder about the wine being too warm. But in the video, Valora overdubbed a line I'd never said. If it's not perfect, I'm canceling the whole thing. The caption read, "When your wedding's not all about you bridezilla vibes family drama." The comments were already in the thousands. Oof. Red flag city. Who raised her? Imagine marrying into that. Poor fiancé. He better run. I watched it once and felt the heat crawl up my spine. I watched it again and felt nothing at all. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, the phone slack in my hand, staring at the reflection of my own face on the black screen after it dimmed. For once, I looked exactly how I felt, tired of being careful. They finally saw me, but only through her filter. That evening, Calder came home later than usual. The keys hit the counter louder than they should have. He didn't say hello. I was at the kitchen island, a mug of untouched coffee in front of me, the air around us heavy with everything we weren't saying. The TV was still muted from last night. A commercial flickered on screen, all fake smiles and perfectly lit countertops. I didn't look at him. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed like a shield. "You've seen the video, huh?" "I have." He hesitated. She didn't mean it to blow up. She was just humiliating me for fun. I offered, still not looking at him. She was joking, Odessa. It's a trend now. People make edits like that all the time. Was she joking when she picked the worst clips she could find? Or when she made it sound like I threatened to cancel everything? "She's your sister," he said, quieter now. "It was just bad judgment." I turned slowly to face him. "You sound just like her." "Hey, Odessa, come on." There it was. The slip. The name that wasn't mine. I didn't flinch. Just blinked once, slowly. "You didn't just confuse names," I said softly. "You confused loyalties." His face fell like a house of cards. No excuse followed. In college, one of my professors told us something on the first day. Names are sacred. Forgetting one means forgetting someone's story. Calder had stopped reading mine years ago. The next afternoon, I drove to my mother's house without calling first. The drive felt shorter than it was, but maybe that's what anger does. It speeds everything up while slowing you down. She opened the door before I could knock, already smiling, already mid-sentence. "Did you see the fundraiser photos? Valora looks so graceful." I told her. I held up my phone mid-word. Press play. The video looped silently in my hand. My mother's eyes flicked toward it, then back to me. "This is what she did to me," I said. "You still think she means well?" She frowned but didn't take the phone. Her hands trembled slightly over her teacup. "She's hurt, honey. She didn't get everything you had." I blinked. What I had? I laughed, bitter and thin. What I had was silence. What I gave was space. What I got was erased. She just wants to feel included. She's taken everything. My voice rose, then broke. How much more is there to give? She didn't mean it maliciously, my mother said, setting her cup down with quiet finality. You know how emotional you get when you're pregnant. That word, emotional, clung to my throat like smoke. Used like a diagnosis, not a description. I looked at her face, searching for some flicker of doubt, some crack in the familiar stone of her indifference. I found none. I placed the phone on the counter. The video looped again, muted. "If my own mother can't see me," I said quietly, "maybe it's time I stop asking her to." I turned and walked toward the door. She didn't call after me. She just sighed, that same sigh she used when Valora broke something and I got blamed for it. Back home, the wedding binder lay open on the table beside a blank sheet of paper. I sat down and opened the drawer slowly, pulling out a pen I hadn't used in months. The ink still flowed smooth. I didn't know where to begin. So I began like it was a goodbye. To everyone attending my wedding. The words came slow at first, careful and even. Then they came faster. I hope you still come. I hope you still dance, still eat, still talk about love like it's something you can decorate. But you won't see me there. You won't hear me thank you for pretending everything was fine. Because I won't be performing. I folded the letter once. Neatly. Deliberately. Set it beside the binder. Not with anger, but with certainty. Some exits don't need slamming doors. Sometimes walking away makes more noise than screaming ever could. That night I didn't cry. I didn't replay the video again. I lay down in the dark and let the silence stay heavy, because for once it was mine. Valora could have a spotlight. Calder could have his mistake. Mom could keep her blind loyalty. Me. I'd keep what was left of my name. My story. My voice. Even a bride has limits. Especially when she finally realizes she was never supposed to be the decoration. She was the foundation. And she had just decided to stop holding up everyone else's illusions. The light from my laptop screen cast a dim blue glow against the cabinets, soft and ghostly. I hadn't moved from the kitchen table in over an hour. My coffee had gone cold. My spine ached from the unforgiving wooden chair, but I couldn't stand up, not yet. Not until I pressed the button. The letter sat beside me, neatly folded like something sacred or dangerous. In some ways, it was both. My binder lay open, its pages marked with sticky tabs, highlighters, and side notes written in the tight script I used when I was pretending to be unshakable. I hadn't touched it since last night, but it grounded me, that binder. All my research, all the dates and receipts and digital footprints. Evidence of a narrative quietly rewritten while I'd been looking the other way. It was nearly 5 a.m. when I finally clicked play. The footage opened with low ambient kitchen noise. Valora's laugh caught on the mic as she adjusted her phone. I watched myself on the screen, sitting at that same kitchen table, trying to get through a sentence, just one sentence, before she interrupted me. Again, and again. Smiling as if it were all some inside joke I didn't understand. I didn't trim the footage for drama. No slow motion. No effects. Just pauses where her voice slipped over mine, where the eye roll wasn't a quirk but a weapon. I isolated moments, frame by frame, until they spoke clearly. Then I uploaded it. No hashtags. No call-out. Just the caption. Here's what you weren't supposed to see. Context matters. By 6 a.m., the comments had started. This changes everything. She manipulated the whole story. Valora owes her sister a public apology. The dam had cracked, then broken, and still I didn't feel what I thought I might. No elation, no adrenaline rush, just a stillness that bordered on sacred. It wasn't revenge. It was reality, finally made visible. The sun began its slow ascent, pale gold stretching across the hardwood floor like fingers waking from sleep. I sat in silence, only moving to turn off the notification pings on my phone. My name was being spoken aloud online, this time not in defense, or confusion, or pity, just recognition. I logged into my email and opened the wedding planning folder. Dozens of subfolders blinked back at me. Budget, guest list, dress ideas, venue proposals. I opened the one labeled vendors, selected the first contact, and began typing. To venue coordinator. Subject, cancellation and account access. Please cancel all reservations under Odessa Quinlan. Remove access from any third-party names, including Valora Dane and Calder Royce. This event is no longer valid. I copied the message. Sent it to the caterer, then the florist, then the photographer. One by one, I ended every agreement, every signature, every promise I had once made to people who now treated me like a placeholder in my own life. By the time I reached the DJ, Calder had called 3 times. I didn't answer. My phone vibrated with insistence. his name pulsing on the screen like a wound. I let it ring until the sound felt distant. I got up, walked to the kitchen wall, unplugged the landline, and coiled the cord into a small circle. It felt ceremonial, like cutting an umbilical cord that had grown twisted. Then I opened the shared Google Calendar, scrolled to June 22nd, clicked delete on the wedding event. The system prompted me. Are you sure you want to remove this event? I hovered for a second. My finger trembled, not with hesitation, but with the weight of how long it had taken me to get here. Yes. And just like that, it was gone. By noon, Valora's Instagram was burning. The internet, with all its fickle loyalty, had turned its head sharply toward her. Screenshots of our footage circulated like wildfire. Clips pulled from her vlogs, out of context until now, were dissected. Side-by-side comparisons, timeline breakdowns, users cross-referencing audio from old stories and pointing out inconsistencies I had swallowed for months. You're a fraud. How could you do this to your sister? This is some narcissist-level stuff. I hope you lose every sponsor you conned. One of her videos had 10,000 downvotes. Another had been taken down entirely. By afternoon, headlines started appearing on trending blogs and influencer gossip accounts. Sister of bride exposes shocking wedding manipulation. Bridezilla vibes was a lie. Odessa Quinlan breaks her silence. And yet, as the narrative reshaped itself publicly, I stayed right where I'd been, on the same chair I had sat in for years. Watching, but not performing. This wasn't a show. This was my life, finally untangled. Dad's voice echoed in my head, quiet as always. There are some things not worth proving, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth protecting. I hadn't tried to prove I was the bride. I just stopped letting them act like I wasn't. And for the first time in years, I could say my name without swallowing grief. Odessa Quinlan. That evening, just before dusk, I drove past what was supposed to be the venue. The parking lot was half empty, but the outdoor lights were on, twinkling fairy strands crisscrossing the garden space like someone had forgotten to pull the plug. The chairs were set in neat rows, white bows tied perfectly on each one. I pulled into the far edge of the lot and sat for a moment. Then, impulsively, I got out. The wind was soft, not cold, and I walked the length of the aisle, my shoes brushing against the gravel path that had been laid for this exact occasion. I reached the front row and paused beside a chair. Reached out, placed my hand on the wooden back. It was real. Solid. Sturdy. I wasn't imagining anything anymore. I didn't see myself walking down that aisle, not in a dream dress, not toward Calder, not toward any version of a future that required me to be smaller so someone else could shine. I imagined sitting, just sitting, in a space that was finally mine, a space that didn't require permission. The next time I stood in front of a room full of people, it wasn't as a bride. It was as a speaker. The folding chairs were arranged in neat, deliberate rows, just like they had been at the wedding venue that never became mine. But this time, they faced a modest wooden stage inside the Rich Hill Community Center. No chandelier. No harpist. No petals beneath the feet. Just warmth in the air and women who had come to listen. The women's leadership retreat had invited me to speak during their closing session. When the email arrived, I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait to check my calendar or ask for anyone's blessing. I just replied yes. My name, only mine, was printed on the program, in soft ink, Odessa Quinlan. No bride-to-be. No sister of Valora Dane. No awkward introductions tethering me to a man or someone else's prestige. Just me, a woman who had once been broken open in public and learned how to stand up without apology. As I stepped to the podium, I noticed the quiet first. Not the anxious kind that clings to new speakers, but the curious kind. Women of all ages leaned forward, not out of pity, but out of something deeper. Recognition, maybe. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't catch. My throat stayed strong, because for the first time, I wasn't performing resilience. I was living it. I told my story. I didn't offer the scandal version, the headlines, the betrayal, the loss of a wedding. That part had already been chewed and digested by people who never cared for the truth. What I gave them was the quiet, intimate version, the woman who once packed away her own instincts to be palatable. Some women are erased by violence, I said, letting the silence breathe. Others by silence. I decided I wouldn't vanish either way. When I finished, the room held its breath. Not empty, not expectant, but full. A kind of sacred stillness. One woman stood to clap. She didn't rush it. Then another followed, then another. Before long, the room echoed with a thunder that wasn't loud, it was steady. Supportive, like they were holding me up without touching me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look down after speaking. Weeks later, I sat in a quiet coffee shop tucked between a used bookstore and a church with a faded mural. I sipped something warm and earthy from a wide-mouthed ceramic mug. I wasn't checking my phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't refresh. The device buzzed once. It was a message from Margot, a friend from the retreat, a clipped screenshot from a local business blog. PR rep Valora Dane loses major clients following public backlash. I stared at the headline, then tucked my phone face down on the table. I didn't open the link. I didn't need the details. I had lived enough of them. Mom had mentioned, passively, like people do when they're afraid of stirring too much truth, that Valora moved back home. No job. No press releases. Just absence. The fall from grace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of your name on a list. And Calder. He had released a statement weeks earlier. His publicist had carefully worded it for maximum damage control. I didn't even know who I was marrying. I hadn't replied. Not then. Not now. People think closure is a conversation, a reckoning, raised voices, and one final line that wins the argument. But sometimes closure is silence. Sometimes it's choosing not to reply, not because you're bitter, but because you're beyond it. Because answering would tether you back to something that no longer deserves your energy. I didn't want Valora or Calder to be ruined. I didn't wish for their humiliation. I just wanted them to stop using my name as a footnote to their ambitions. A memory floated in, my father on the back porch, smoke curling from his cigarette like a ghost of the man he used to be. He was watching the trees move, slow and heavy in the wind. Some people don't change, he said, but you don't need their apology to heal. Back then, I thought that meant giving up. Now I understood. It meant choosing not to keep yourself hostage while waiting. Maybe losing me was the most honest consequence I ever gave them. Back home, the nursery was nearly complete. Cream-colored walls, a handmade mobile above the crib, birds cut from recycled storybooks, a rocker near the window, the kind that creaked slightly when it moved, like it held old lullabies in its joints. Sunlight spilled across the carpet, slow and golden, like it wanted to stay a while. I reached for a small wooden frame I had sanded myself. Inside, I placed a quote I'd written in my own hand. Belong to no one but yourself. It was a sentence I wished someone had whispered to me as a child. It was also a promise. I picked up my daughter, and whispered her name into the soft hollow behind her ear. A name no one else helped me choose. Not Calder. Not Valora. Not even my mother. Just me. The name was old-fashioned, quiet in strength. It wasn't trendy. It wouldn't trend. But it was hers. It was mine. It was our line in the sand, saying, "We begin again here." She blinked up at me, her gaze slow and steady, like she already knew she didn't know the world anything but her breath. She would never have to fight to keep her name. And I would never again trade mine away for comfort disguised as belonging. That night, after she had drifted asleep, I sat again at the kitchen table. The same chair, the same wooden surface with a faint coffee stain in the corner, Same pen, different heart. I opened a fresh page in my journal, wrote the date, then one line. You don't owe anyone for surviving, but you owe yourself a life beyond endurance. I didn't write to be forgiven. I didn't write to forgive. I wrote to remember what it costs to disappear, to remember how long it takes to return, to remember that I did not die the day they tried to erase me. I began. Maybe one day, Valora will read my words. Maybe not. Maybe someone will ask Calder about me, and he'll flinch at the memory of what he never really understood. Or maybe the world will forget them both. Either way, I'm done bleeding for anyone else's lesson. I won't be the example carved out of suffering. I won't be the metaphor for someone else's redemption arc. I am not unfinished. I am not waiting. I am not sorry. I don't need forgiveness. Some stories don't end with a door slamming shut. They end with a woman standing still, finally, fully, without needing anyone to clap. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away just to remember who you are? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are already waiting to be told.